The commission will come to order. Thank you to our witnesses and to all who are following this hearing online. I want to thank my fellow commissioners, senators, and congressmen, bipartisan group, by the way, very important part of this commission's history. Today's message is straightforward. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, is waging a systematic campaign to bend every faith in China to party rule. CCP authorities aim for the complete subordination of religious belief to state ideology. Re-engineering doctrine, leadership, education, architecture, and even online worship. The CCP is not content to police behavior. It wants to control the conscience and intrude on the most powerful and personal relationship there is, the one individuals have with God. The title of this hearing asks, why does religious freedom in China matter to the United States? We certainly want to hear our witnesses answer this question. And we have a very distinguished panel here. But let me offer one reason why this hearing matters by reading part of a sermon by detained pastor Wang Yi, who met with President George W. Bush in the Oval Office in 2006 and was just awarded one of NED's highest prizes. In one of his last sermons, before being detained, Pastor Yi said, quote, "The rulers of this country are waging a war in the Uyghur region, in Tibet, in Shanghai, in Beijing. And the rulers who are waging this war have chosen for themselves an enemy that can never be imprisoned, an enemy that can never be destroyed, an enemy that can never be controlled or subdued, namely the soul of human beings." Pastor Wei Yang may now be in prison, but he and millions of others like him are not subdued. That is why this hearing matters, not just for one community or one country or one faith, but for the defense of human dignity and conscience everywhere. The CCP wants believers in China to feel isolated and forgotten. Our responsibility is to show them and to show Beijing that they are neither. There are currently 1,647 documented religious cases in the CECC's political prisoner database, though that number may be 10 times higher when we consider all those detained in the Uyghur region. At least a dozen bishops and priests from my own Catholic Church and Catholic faith are detained. We have documented imprisonment, torture, and worse for such simple acts as owning a prayer book, growing a beard, or gathering for worship. My mother was very devout Catholic, and very early on in the 1980s, it's a long story, but she went to the Soviet Union on a trip, and my courageous mom brought a bunch of Bibles to hand out to the long-suffering people of Russia. Courageous. My mom's no longer with me today, but that was one of the stories I told at her eulogy. Courageous Catholic bringing the faith to starving Russians who longed for the faith and couldn't get it. And she brought them small Bibles. Freedom of religion is under assault worldwide. Witness what is happening in Nigeria. But nowhere is the scale of the threat greater than in China. There are an estimated 500 million in China whose faith traditions face some form of restriction or control. Think about that number, 500 million. And the CCP's grip on religion does not end at its borders. Through transnational repression, it harasses exiled believers, infiltrates religious communities abroad, and intimidates diaspora groups to remain silent. Some of our witnesses have personal experience with intimidation or transnational repression right here in America. Since Xi Jinping came to power, he has pushed an aggressive agenda to roll back what little space for independent religion once existed and to assert CCP dominance over all aspects of religious life. Christian pastors are prosecuted for fraud, for accepting charity. Uyghur Muslims are punished for reading the Quran at home. Tibetan Buddhists are targeted for honoring the Dalai Lama. Falun Gong practitioners are tortured for peaceful meditation the party cannot control. Across China, the party has closed churches, imprisoned pastors and priests, and ordered the removal of Islamic and Tibetan Buddhist symbols from buildings. We're here today because the right to believe, according to one's own conscience, is not a privilege government may grant or withhold. It is a universal human right, central to human dignity and human flourishing. We now know that religious freedom is a critical element in societies that are stable and prosperous. Our own history, from the earliest colonies to the First Amendment, reflects a simple truth. Societies are freer, fairer, and more stable when people are free to worship, to practice their faith, and to live, speak, and act according to their beliefs. The CCP fears the power of faith because it is a source of values and moral authority it cannot control. That is why it demands that crosses come down and portraits of Xi Jinping go up. It is why Catholic priests must preach party slogans alongside sacred texts. It is why so many religious leaders and religious believers are jailed. To the CCP, faith is not just a challenge, it is an existential threat to its grip on power and why it must be controlled or destroyed. These brave witnesses at our hearing today send a message to China that the U.S. Congress takes note. We are watching. The soul of these human beings will not be subdued. And I want to next turn to my Chairman Smith, for his opening statement, and then I will also ask Senator Merkley, Representative McGovern to make a statement if they so choose. Gentlemen, thank you. And again, to our courageous witnesses, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much for convening this very important hearing and the sense of urgency you and our distinguished witnesses are bringing to the further deterioration of religious freedom, lack thereof, in the People's Republic of China. I say urgent because the Chinese Communist Party, directed by General Secretary Xi Jinping, is engaged in one of the most extensive crackdowns on the Protestant Christian house church in 40 years. I also say urgent because as I look around at the room, I see friends of so many loved ones who have people who are either languishing in prison or under house arrest. And I look at Bob Fu. I mean, Bob Fu has been a mentor to me personally, to my subcommittee on human rights, and to this commission for decades, speaking truth to power eloquently and effectively, giving us so many insights, and that goes for many of us in the House and Senate as well. I remember Frank Wolf and I, just parenthetically, were once in Beijing meeting with house church leaders. Who are we talking to on the line? Bob Fu from the embassy as well as from the van, getting further insight. So Bob, thank you so much. And of course, Ambassador Sam Brownback, who's literally written the book on how, writing a book right now, how to combat this and to make it clear. What an ambassador at large Sam Brownback has been, and his voice is incredibly important. All of you have made such a difference, and Sam, thank you. I would note, again, parenthetically, you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, about Nigeria. Through a little snafu in scheduling, I'm chairing a hearing on Nigeria at 11 o'clock, so I'm going to have to leave, but Sam testified at our last hearing on that and made just powerful statements about how not just Christians, but Muslims are being killed, as the president just said, conferring CPC status on Nigeria, and very eloquent did he do it. This is an existential threat to the Christians, but it's also the Muslims who are being killed if they don't comport to Boko Haram and others. So, Sam, thank you for that, and we'll be doing more. We'll look forward to your voice at future hearings to defend that. At its core, religious freedom is about the right of conscience, what George Washington called that little spark of celestial fire, which is the inviolable domain of the heart of every human being. I'm proud to say that this, working with Mr. McGovern as well as Senator Merkley, we've chaired 14 hearings on religious freedom, or the lack, again, of it in China. And I've worked with my friends, and you, Chairman, you're doing a great job, and I do thank you for that. We all do for that. When we say religious freedom is a universal human right, it's because it's guaranteed by a sovereign God, especially, who created human beings in his own image and likeness, and imbued in all of us an inalienable dignity and worth, whether they were born in Washington or Wuhan. It is thus not a Western construct, but it is a universal one. Yet the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, leader of the world's largest atheistic state, would force his own people to think otherwise. He would have the Chinese people believe that religious freedom is not for them, that religion itself is not for them, because the party that he leads are terrified of religious faith. They fear and they're scared of any moral or spiritual authority outside the control of the party, and they punish worship of anyone but Xi Jinping. Instead, the Chinese Communist Party wants to take control over heart, mind, and spirit of each citizen of China. In one particularly ludicrous, yet equally insidious example, in September, the Cyberspace Administration of China launched a 2-month clear and bright campaign that polices pessimism and negative emotions, among other thought crimes. I mean, this is theater of the absurd. It's also totalitarianism, pure and simple, and totalitarian governments cannot abide by freedom of religion or belief. And yet they cannot extinguish it. The church, the believers, the Uyghurs, the Falun Gong practitioners, the Tibetan Buddhists, all of them redouble their efforts to move forward in their faith tradition, and this commission and this Congress and our country and so many others do everything we can to help them. When authorities shut down the Zion Church in Beijing, then one of the city's largest, Pastor Ezra Jin took the church nationwide by moving online, reaching more people than it ever could have before. We are proud to have as one of our witnesses, Pastor Jin's daughter, Grace, who worked for the CECC, and we thank her for her tremendous insights and leadership, and her father is just, again, another great hero. In Fujian province, authorities confined underground Catholic Bishop Gu Shijing to his residence. And how did he respond? He joyfully celebrated the 40th anniversary of his priestly ordination by serving communion to pilgrims through the bars of the chain gate outside of his home. I mean, irrepressible, will not give up, and we need to stand in solidarity with him and everyone like him. These are only a few examples. We will continue on this commission, I know, to push hard for religious freedom. Again, we are inspired and informed by these tremendous witnesses, Mr. Chairman, that you have assembled for this hearing, and I look forward to their testimony. I regret that I will have to leave to chair the other hearing at 11, so I apologize in advance.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Now to my other co-chair, Senator Merkley.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm always humbled when I'm at these gatherings because our witnesses have experienced so much in their personal lives, their families, often their community, in terms of the challenges that they have faced carrying the torch of religious freedom. I'm particularly delighted to have a couple of you back who have the Senate connections. Senator Brownback, and then became an ambassador, but certainly served here with distinction. Good to have you back, Ambassador. And Grace, as mentioned by my colleague, Congressman Smith, worked on this very commission, this Congressional Executive Commission on China. And so she is in that place of carrying both the academic knowledge portfolio, but also the very personal advocacy with her family, so affected by the crackdown on religion in China. We have seen such suppression and oppression directed against Christian congregations and leaders in China. We have seen oppression against the Muslims and the genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. We've seen the attempted erasure of Tibetan culture and Buddhist religious practice. Under President Xi's Sinicization campaign, the Chinese government is using pressure and coercion to do all they can to extinguish religious communities and suppress the human soul. The U.S. has in our very founding the aspiration for religious freedom, a spirit we have carried for centuries, and certainly it kind of brings us to this type of advocacy today for religious freedom, not just here in the United States, but around the world. So welcome, and like my colleague, we have another hearing on China upstairs on the Foreign Relations Committee related to Taiwan. So I also apologize I'll not be able to be here for the full testimony, but I will be reading it all, hearing about it from my team, and partnering with you as we go forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Senator Merkley. Congressman McGovern.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I want to thank Chair Sullivan and Co-Chair Smith for convening this important hearing. I want to thank Senator Merkley and Representative Strong for their leadership on these issues as well. You know, we have different political philosophies, but we are together in championing human rights and religious freedom. Religious freedom has been at the core of the Commission's work since its founding, and it has been the subject of numerous hearings and well-documented reporting. And I understand that the 2025 annual report is close to finalization, and I look forward to its publication so that all members can benefit from its analysis and its recommendations. I commend the dedicated nonpartisan staff of the Commission for their hard work in getting this 300-plus page report researched, written, and released. It's a lot of work, and it's good work, and it's important work. Religious freedom is protected under Article 18 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, which affirms that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. In the United States, it is protected by the First Amendment to the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We Americans are very proud of this protection of our rights. As a practicing Catholic, I feel a deep personal connection to the right to worship and belief according to one's conscience. Defense of this fundamental right in both national and international law is essential to our work as public servants. China's Constitution also provides that the state cannot compel citizens to believe in or not to believe in any religion, or discriminate against citizens who believe in or do not believe in any religion. But as we will hear today, such protection is honored in the breach. They don't respect that, they don't follow it. This is a reminder that even the strongest constitutional provisions on paper cannot protect citizens' rights if those in power choose to disregard them for political ends. You know, in 2022, I was honored to co-chair this Commission's hearing on how Chinese authorities were expanding digital tools to surveil and suppress online religious expression. I am pleased that today's witnesses will update us on the PRC's policies and tactics for coercive control of religion and their impact on individuals and communities. I welcome Ambassador Sam Brownback, who headed the State Department's International Religious Freedom Office and remains a powerful leader in the field. I look forward to the testimony of those who will speak to the experiences of Hui Muslims, Christians, and Tibetans under the PRC's ongoing repression. In July, several UN Special Rapporteurs and working groups issued a statement on the Chinese government's interference in the succession of the Dalai Lama and the enforced disappearance of the 11th Panchen Lama, Gedun Choki Nyima. This is a U.S. priority, as Senator Marco Rubio and I put into law in the Tibetan Policy and Support Act. We will also hear very personal testimony. Last month, Chinese authorities launched a multi-city crackdown on the unregistered House Zion Church and detained several individuals, including Pastor Ezra Jin. Many of us condemned this violation. His daughter, Grace Jin Drexel, joins us today to speak about her father and call for his release. Grace was recently a staff member of the CECC, helping raise awareness about prisoners of conscience persecuted for their faith. Now her own father is one. We stand with Grace and her family and join in their call. We must commit our voices loudly and clearly to defend the rights of those targeted for exercising their right to freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. But to be effective, our voice must carry moral credibility. And I worry that we are not living up to what is expected of us. The United States is at best when we lead by example. When we do not, we do a disservice to those overseas we are trying to help. Earlier this week, you may have read this in the news, congregants of a church in Charlotte, North Carolina, scattered into the woods when mass federal agents arrived and detained one of their members. The church has suspended services until members feel safe to gather again without the threat of Border Patrol raids. In July, the bishop of the Diocese of San Bernardino, California, told 1.2 million people in his diocese to stay home from Mass on Sundays to avoid being questioned or detained by ICE. I spoke with 3 Catholic bishops yesterday who again reinforced the concern that they have about members of their church being afraid to go to church. Imam Solomon, who fled persecution in Egypt and served as a chaplain at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital, spent 2.5 months in ICE detention. So our message to the Chinese government is that it is wrong for them to round up members of the Zion Church, to force worshipers to go underground, and to put clergy in jail. Our voice would have much more credibility if our own government were not acting in a similar way. The freedom of thought, conscience, and religion is universal. This right exists regardless of one's beliefs, nationalist, or citizenship status. And so let us be clear and consistent in this message that we are sending to the people of China. Again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, Congressman McGovern. And now it is my honor to introduce our distinguished panel. Let me begin with a very distinguished American, Ambassador Sam Brownback. It's hard to figure out, Ambassador, to call you ambassador, governor, senator. You've held all these positions. Very, very impressive. You served as the ambassador at large for international religious freedom from February 2018 to January 2021, where he was the State Department's chief diplomat on the issues of protecting the right to religious liberty around the world. He served as governor of Kansas from 2011 to 2018. Ambassador Brownback currently serves as a co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Summit and chairman of the National Committee for Religious Freedom. Next, we have Mr. Ismail Juma. Mr. Juma is a human rights activist with a background in the study of religious history. He fled China with his family in 2011 after being detained by PRC authorities. As the founder of Hope Umbrella International Foundation, he works to protect freedom seekers, assist new immigrants, and fosters reconciliation between different ethnic and religious groups. Our next distinguished witness is Bu Chong Sering. Mr. Sering was born in Tibet. His family fled to India in 1960 in the wake of the Chinese Communist invasion. He studied in India and worked as a journalist before joining the Central Tibetan Administration and serving in the offices of His Holiness in the Dalai Lama. He currently leads the Research and Monitoring Unit at the International Campaign for Tibet, where he has worked since 1995. He was awarded the Truman Reagan Freedom Medal by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation in 2023. Our next witness is Mr. Bob Fu. Dr. Fu was a student leader during the Tiananmen Square demonstrations in 1989. Dr. Fu led a house church in Beijing until he and his wife were imprisoned for, quote, illegal evangelicalism. They fled to the United States as religious refugees, founding China Aid in 2002 to shine light on China's human rights abuses and promote religious freedom in China. Dr. Fu currently serves as the Family Research Council Senior Fellow for International Religious Freedom. He is the author of God's Double Agent. Finally, Grace Jen Drexel. I had the honor of meeting Grace a couple weeks ago here in the U.S. Senate. She is the daughter of Pastor Mingri Ezra Jin of Zion Church in China, one of the country's largest and most influential houses of worship. In October 2025, Pastor Jin and dozens of other leaders were detained as part of the largest crackdown against independent house churches in the last 40 years. Grace has been advocating for her father ever since. She serves as a national security research analyst in the U.S. Senate and previously worked on this commission on China issues. Welcome to all our witnesses. For each, we will have a 5-minute opening statement. If you have a longer opening statement, a written statement, we will certainly put that in the record, and we begin with Ambassador Brownback.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm honored to be here and honored to be with you all and to see you and the work that I've done with several of you for many, many years, and it's been important work and maybe more important than now. I think that the ground that you've laid on dealing with China and now in our conflict with China, this is important for us to really move forward in our policy. What I'm going to suggest today is that we take really a shift in our strategy towards religious freedom. I think for too long we've looked at it mostly as a human rights issue and often kind of a boutique human rights issue, really not a central one. To me now and in our conflict with China, this is a national security issue. It's a national security imperative, and we need to shift our thinking away from this is a human rights issue to this is a national security issue and put it really and squarely in that category. China's at war with faith, and it's at war with us. We should unequivocally and clearly be on the side of their opponents. And we should stand clearly with them. I think it's also quite clear that China fears religious freedom far more than they fear our aircraft carriers or our nuclear weapons. They're far more concerned. They spend billions of dollars annually harassing everybody up and down this line here. I've just finished a book up that's at the publishers on China's war on faith. They treat everybody the same. You will either be subdued to us or we're going to eliminate you. You choose, but it's one of the two. And Xi Jinping is God, not whoever you're believing in. And the stories are very, very consistent on this. So I look at religious freedom, honestly, as our greatest weapon in this battle that we're in today. And China's weakness is their governance. And we need to take this really into our strategy. So that's what I'm putting forward here today. My recommendations are we make religious freedom in China a part of our national security objectives towards China. That we develop a national security strategy for the U.S. and other nations to support religious freedom inside of China. Use economic sanctions like in the Frank Wolf International Religious Freedom Act towards China. They've been a CPC country since we started that designation. They've not paid a cent for that, not a cent. We should ask President Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, Secretary of War Hegseth to meet with exiled leaders from the various communities that have been persecuted, the Falun Gong, Christians, Muslims, Buddhist community. And then specifically in these communities, I just would say, like Falun Gong, the Chinese Communist Party fears Falun Gong more than anybody. And I've puzzled at that for the longest time. Why? But it's the most indigenous of all of them. It's like sowing wheat on the Kansas soil. It just grows. They got to 90 million adherents in 7 years. Well, that scares the pants off of the Chinese Communist Party. So we should really be working with them. The Falun Gong has a registry of millions of people that have left the Chinese Communist Party. I think we should do the following: recognize a genocide against the Falun Gong being done by the Chinese government. They have sought to wipe them out. Meet with key leaders in exile, that are in exile, to support their right to religious freedom in China, Falun Gong members, and support their effort to break the great Chinese internet firewall, which many of us have been about for a long time. Christians, we obviously need to strongly advocate for the release of people like Pastor Ezra Jin, the Zion Church, Pastor Wang Yi, who is really the Martin Luther King Jr. of China. His statements from jail have been poetic. They're beautiful. And the 10 Catholic bishops that Nina Shea identified in an article that are imprisoned or held somewhere in China. 10 bishops. And what do we hear? Do people even know they're arrested? We should also encourage private sector entities with significant ties to China to advocate for prisoners of conscience and human rights lawyers. Groups like the NBA, Hollywood, major businesses, Tibetan Buddhists. There is a cultural genocide in Tibet going on today, and we need to call it out. We should categorically reject China's government's claim to the right to appoint the next Dalai Lama. Talk about something that's ridiculous. Said Vice President Rubio or, Vice President Vance or Secretary Rubio to Dharamsala to meet with the Dalai Lama. I believe we should announce our support for the Dalai Lama's middle way approach. For Tibet, genuine autonomy for Tibet within China. Now, while I have significant doubts that this will work, but if China will not agree to this within a set period of time, say 60 days, we should announce our recognition of an independent Tibet. If they're not going to go with this route that he's put forward, we should announce our support for an independent Tibet. Tibet, and for that matter, Xinjiang, have never been a part of China. No more than Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan were a part of Russia. They never were. They never have been. And we should call it out. For the Uyghurs, they've been moved from forced labor, confinement, incarceration, from concentration camps to forced labor. Same incarceration, different setting. Transnational oppression. We've got to pass legislation to address transnational oppression and prosecute people that have done it. We should start addressing Xinjiang as East Turkestan in our government documents. It's not new frontier for China, it's East Turkestan. And we should aggressively enforce our laws against use of forced labor. This, in summary, it's time to support religious freedom inside China. We've noted it for a long time, and we've got to get past it. And Mr. Chairman, I would submit for the record a map of China that was put in the Washington Examiner that actually shows what China looks like map-wise when you take East Turkestan, Tibet, the occupied territories out. I think we need to start showing this. Sorry I went over on my time.
Without objection. Thank you, Ambassador Brownback. Our next witness we want to hear from is Mr. Juma.
谢谢大家这一次给我这样的一个特别好的一个机会，我代表1000多万的中国回族穆斯林在这里讲话，既是我的荣幸，也是我的一份责任。那么今天呢，因为我的英文不好，所以请我的翻译帮我来宣讲，谢谢。
Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. It is an honor and a solemn responsibility to speak on behalf of, thank you, tens of millions in China who cannot speak for themselves. And I will now read the prepared English statement from Mr. Juma today. As a member of the more than 10 million Hui Muslims of China, and as a human rights advocate and survivor of religious freedom, religious persecution, I appear before you today to present a truth that has been systematically concealed. China's Muslim communities are facing the most severe, widespread, and systematically engineered crisis to their physical survival and basic freedoms since 1949. On the CCP's re-engineering project, many have misunderstood the CCP to be merely restricting religions. This is patently false. The CCP is a political organization founded on a commitment to eradicate all religion. Its doctrine views organized faith, moral systems, and independent community structures as existential threats to totalitarian control. When it does not yet possess the capacity to destroy religion outright, it restricts it. And when it does acquire that capacity, it moves to eliminate it without hesitation, just as it has done to NGOs and civic groups. Under the veneer of what is called re-engineering project, the CCP seeks to reshape faith into ideological appendages to the party state and to stoke fear in Chinese communities in China and beyond. Across Ningxia, Gansu, Qinghai, Yunnan, and other regions, thousands of mosques have had their domes demolished, minarets removed, Quranic inscriptions erased, and Arabic calligraphy scraped away. Many mosques have been forcibly converted into cultural plazas, civilization practice centers, interiors stripped of religious symbolism, exteriors sanitized. This is not merely physical destruction. It is surgical removal of the Muslim spiritual landscape. Acts that are entirely normal in Muslim societies are maligned and redefined as crimes, such as fasting under Ramadan, teaching the Quran privately, wearing a hijab or traditional attire, growing a religious beard, children learning at mosques, and family religious gatherings. These practices can result in police interrogation, fines, detention, or being sent to re-education camps. This is a systematic project to redefine faith as illegal. On the destruction of religious knowledge and cultural eradication, the lifeblood of Hui, Uyghur, Kazakh, and other Muslim communities and centuries-old Islamic educational tradition has been deliberately dismantled. Imams arbitrarily have been detained or forced into political indoctrination. Arabic instructions have been severely restricted. Religious texts have been censored and rewritten. CCP-approved political reinterpretations of the Quran have been mandated. A people's deepest moral and cultural inheritance has been uprooted at its source. Repression in Xinjiang has also not ended, it's just become more covert. There's a dangerous misconception that repression in Xinjiang has eased. The truth is, the repression has not stopped, it has evolved. What was once mass internment has transformed into pervasive surveillance and control. Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Hui, and as well as Han Chinese who have converted to Islam continue to endure forced labor, family separation, mosque demolitions, digital surveillance, reproductive restrictions, and stabilization policing systems. Xinjiang today exists in a reality of systematic, totalitarian social engineering. The CCP also deploys digital tools and influence operations to intimidate overseas Muslims by monitoring Chinese Muslims abroad through social media, by coordinating bot attacks and character assassination campaigns, using family members in China as hostages, and creating an atmosphere of fear in diaspora communities. A classic example, a respected Islamic scholar visiting Chinese Muslim migrants in Malaysia told them he planned to meet Mr. Juma in the United States. Their reaction was a mixture of excitement and dread. Their fear was simple. If their names appear alongside Mr. Juma in any report, their relatives in China would face retaliation. The fear is real, widespread, and rational. Why does this matter to the national interests of the United States? China's war on religion is not a domestic Chinese issue. It directly impacts American national security, values, and international standing. It strikes at the foundation of America's identity. If the world's largest authoritarian state can eradicate religious freedom without consequences, it undermines the authority of America's founding values and global leadership. CCP transnational repression violates US sovereignty. Their intimidation and surveillance of individuals in the US is a direct assault on US rule of law. It also weakens American standing within the Muslim world. Beijing is persecuting Muslims at home while courting Muslim-majority countries abroad, reshaping geopolitical alignments to America's detriment. Digital surveillance and authoritarianism is a new and growing threat. China's export of AI surveillance and religious profiling systems is transforming autocracies worldwide. Religious oppression is also fueling radicalization. Freedom of religion is a proven safeguard against extremism. Protecting Chinese Muslim religious freedom strengthens global and US security. By preventing a global shift towards authoritarianism, if we are to allow CCP's model to become a global norm, it will erode the international order and freedom. In conclusion, and apologies for going over time, Mr. Juma today is speaking for those who cannot. He speaks today to honor those who have been silenced, to expose an ongoing system of religious persecution, to defend the universal right to religious freedom, and to urge the United States and the international community to act. If we remain silent today, tomorrow there will be no one left to speak. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Juma. Our next witness is Mr. Sering.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to thank CECC for giving me this opportunity to testify about China's religious policies in Tibet and how it matters to the United States. Tibetan Buddhism is linked to the security of the Indian subcontinent through its historical ties and its cultural and ethnic connections across the Himalayan region. The cultural influence of Tibetan Buddhism in the Indian subcontinent has also been a factor in regional stability. The Indian subcontinent is also a major player in the Indo-Pacific region and matters to the United States due to its massive economic importance, strategic security interests, and its role in global stability and the rule-based order. I would like to submit my full text for the record and will summarize here.
Without objection.
Thank you. Opinion polls have clearly showed repeatedly here in the United States that the majority of Americans embraced His Holiness the Dalai Lama, not just as a religious leader, but also as an international statesman. Americans have also shown that they care deeply about what happens in Tibet, and successive Congresses and administrations have passed legislative initiatives on Tibet. China has been blatantly using Tibetan Buddhism as a vehicle to not only control the Tibetan people, but also to influence the international community, including citizens of India, Nepal, Bhutan, as well as here in the United States. Over the years, China has been increasing pressure on Nepal to restrict Tibetan religious activities, leading to a climate of fear and limited freedoms for Tibetans there. Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, is a sacred place for pilgrimage for all followers of Tibetan Buddhism, and the Chinese government is using access to Tibet and Lhasa to serve its political agenda. American citizens who wish to travel to Tibet, including Tibetan Americans, are being faced with obstructions by the Chinese government, while at the same time the Chinese allow a selective group of journalists to go to Tibet and to fulfill China's narrative on Tibet and to serve it for its propaganda material. China not only restricts Tibetan religious freedom, but also attempts to interfere in the activities of Tibetans and Tibet supporters abroad. In a report on Chinese transnational repression of Tibetan diaspora communities, the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy says China is attempting to control the actions of exiled Tibetans. Chinese authorities weaponize their relatives in Tibet by harming, threatening, or otherwise manipulating them. The looming threat resulting from ubiquitous surveillance also fosters a constant feeling of unease that spreads fear and disembowels exiled communities. The head of the Central Tibetan Administration, Sikyong Tempa himself, said how when he went to Australia, was obstructed, or the Chinese government tried to obstruct him from having an interview by an Australian TV. Unfortunately, the Chinese government was not successful there. More egregiously, in July this year, the Chinese authorities disappeared Tang Yedi, a Chinese student and a follower of Tibetan Buddhism, who had been advocating peacefully in France for Tibet and Tibetan rights. Tang had been on a visit to China when she was disappeared in Yunnan. Reports indicate that she was taken away by a state security official and is being held incommunicado. The Chinese government's policy on Tibetan religion has moved from total destruction to one of control and annihilation of Tibetan identity. Over the years, the Chinese government has promulgated various regulations to bring Tibetan monasteries under tighter security control. The Buddhist Association of China is being used as a key instrument in this vehicle. China failed to place the current Dalai Lama in its control and is now trying to use the occasion of the next Dalai Lama to impose its authority on Tibet, and for now in the future by trying to claim authority or the right to the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. They have done that in the case of the Panchen Lama, which they failed to legitimize even today. The Chinese government interference with the Dalai Lama is a clear indication of geopolitical implications on many Tibetan Buddhist institutions here in the United States and in the Indian subcontinent and in Mongolia. And I would like to end by having some recommendations. I would like to echo two of the recommendations by Ambassador Brownback about cultural genocide and about having Vice President wants and Secretary Rubio to visit Dharamsala to meet His Holiness. The Trump administration should implement TPSA, other legislative, and sanction Chinese authorities who deny Tibetan religious freedom. They should engage multilaterally with other countries on Tibetan religious freedom. They should demand the release of Tibetan political prisoners, including the 11th Panchen Lama and Tang Edi. They should stop transnational repression. They should stop Tibetan religious freedom deny, but more importantly, they should resolve the Tibetan issue politically, as Ambassador Brownback said. If they don't do that, even merely having superficial changes will not have a lasting solution to the Tibetan people. And Tibet has served a buffer in the past, and if it's not, in the future, if it's not resolved, it will continue to be a national security risk to the American policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sering. Our next witness is Dr. Fu.
Chairman Sullivan, Co-Chair Smith, and Congressman McGovern, and distinguished panelists and friends, thank you for this opportunity to testify before you. I speak as a former prisoner of conscience and a founder of China Aid and an American citizen whose own family was targeted on U.S. soil by the CCP. And China's war on faith has entered a new and dangerous phase. I totally agree with Ambassador Brownback that we, as in the U.S. government, should lift our treatment of religious freedom, elevate it into a national security instead of a purely matter of human rights. The CCP is no longer satisfied with just controlling churches and mosques. It now seeks to control the entire inner life of its citizens. Its goal is nothing less than to eliminate all independent faith and replace it with the absolute loyalty to the CCP and Xi Jinping's thoughts. So I want to highlight 4 trends. The first, the CCP is now criminalizing normal Christian life. The pastors are now being sentenced to 10 or 15 years for receiving tithes and offerings. And no case demonstrates this more clearly than the shocking sentence handed down to Pastor Yang Rongli, who received 15 years, and her husband, Pastor Wang Xiaoguang, received nearly 10 years back to April to June this year for simply, along with 10 other church leaders who were sentenced to various years of sentence for managing church donations at Golden Lampstand Church in Shanxi province. And Christians are also arrested for worshiping or praying online. And Christians who attend overseas Bible conferences or mission trainings are now being arrested. Earlier this year, a Christian lady from Beijing, Dong Yumei, was arrested and has still not being assigned for trial. And second trend is the CCP is targeting the next generation, the children's access to the Bible, essentially declared a war against the Bible. Children are totally banned from entering into the church. Youth ministries are shut down. Parents are threatened for teaching the Bible at home. And a 71-year-old sister, Wang Honglan from Inner Mongolia, received nearly 5 years imprisonment for handing out free Bibles. And third trend is the CCP continues to disappear and imprison its most courageous religious leaders, such as my good friend Ezra Jin and Pastor Wang Yi. And of course, other religiously motivated civil society leaders like Gao Zhisheng, a human rights lawyer named as Conscience of China, still has been missing for over 8 years, dead or alive, nobody knows. And Dr. Wang Bingzhang, a Christian democracy advocate, still serving life imprisonment after being kidnapped from Vietnam. a lady called Zhang Yadi, a Chinese convert to Tibetan Buddhism, who vanished upon returning to China after studying in Europe. The fourth trend is the CCP's persecution actually does not stop at China's border. It already extended its long arm to overseas, especially in the free world soils. In 2020, my own home in Texas was being surrounded by as many as over 100 CCP agents and hired thugs day and night surrounding my home, issuing threat against my family, my ministry, and my children. The only purpose, they said, if I stop the Ministry of China Aid, they will leave. For 3 months, they're surrounding at my home. And Chinese churches in the US and Canada have also been pressured to even raising the CCP's own flag in their churches, congregation, pulpits. Videos have already shown that Chinese church pastor in Los Angeles raising the Chinese Communist Party flag, singing the red songs, the red revolutionary songs of the CCP during the Chinese so-called National Day in Los Angeles. And certainly they won't raise the American flag to celebrate the Americans' Independence Day. So I will leave my recommendations during the Q&A time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Fu. Very powerful testimony and frustrating. I don't know why we allow Chinese communist thugs to protest and harass American citizens. Right? They should all be thrown in jail, in my view, or kicked out of the country. Our last witness is Grace Jen Drexel. And Grace, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. On October 10th, my father, Pastor Ezra Jin Mingri, was arrested by the Chinese authority along with 27 other church pastors and leaders of Zion Church. 17 church leaders now remain in prison with him, and all 18 have been formally arrested this week. This crackdown has been reported as the largest takedown of an independent church in China since the Cultural Revolution. Because of the prominence of the church and the brazenness of the Chinese repression, this case has become an international incident and has been profiled extensively on international press, attracting a number of statements by public support across the U.S. government and beyond. Thank you so much, including from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Many of these church leaders were taken in front of their young families, who now they leave behind. My father and several other older leaders struggle with various health issues, and we are deeply concerned about their treatment in prison. I urge the Chinese government to release all these Zion Church members immediately and unconditionally. My father's church, Zion Church, was founded in 2007 with the mission to be faithful to God's word and to serve the families and communities around us. By God's grace and power, within just 1 decade, Zion grew rapidly into the largest emerging urban house church in China, with more than 1,500 members at the time. Since Chairman Xi Jinping came into power, he had refocused the Chinese Communist Party and the state to strengthen ideological purity and consolidate control of society. In 2016, Xi rewrote the regulation on religion in China and emphasized the need to sinocize religion. However, at its core, this is not about making the religion more Chinese. Christians in China already have Chinese Bibles, indigenous hymns, their own church history, and unique theology grown from years of persecution. Our churches are not led by foreign missionaries, but by Chinese Christians themselves. Instead, the campaign is truly about forcing socialist core values into the religion. It's less xenophization, it is more partification of religion. Beginning in 2018, a wave of persecution and crackdown on all religion began under the auspices of this xenocization. In 2018, Zion Church was also targeted because the church leadership refused to install facial recognition cameras inside the sanctuary. The government harassed hundreds of church members, threatened them with their jobs, rented houses, children's education, and even their parents' retirement accounts. Many of the congregants did, in fact, pay these consequences to keep their faith. On September 9th, hundreds of police brutally seized and shuttered the church buildings, took hold of church assets, and briefly detained and closely surveyed the pastors and leaders. And since 2018, my father has been put under an exit ban and consequently has been forcibly separated from my family in the US for more than 7 years. However, as powerful as the Chinese Communist Party is, it will never be able to take our faith and belief from us. In Zion's own church history, we've already seen how the government's attempt to coerce the faith and control the faithful have backfired, laying bare the hollowness of authoritarian ideology and the strength of faith, and ultimately growing the church. Because the church lost its place of worship, it pushed my father's church to develop a hybrid online-offline model that went nationwide, launching 100 new church plants across 40 cities across China, growing the church to the largest it has ever been, reaching 10,000 people daily. In 2015, a new wave of religious persecution is brewing across China. Earlier this year, multiple Zion church sites in dozens of cities were frequently disrupted during our Sunday services, with over 150 pastors and elders and church members were taken to the police station. They were harassed, threatened, interrogated, and some briefly detained. In May of this year, Pastor Gao Quanfu, a dear friend of my father's based in Xi'an, was detained on criminal charges of using superstitious activities to undermine the implementation of law and fraud. His son is also here with us in the audience today, seeking to speak out about his parents and their church. In June, multiple co-workers of Golden Lampstand Church in Linfen were imprisoned for fraud, including Pastor Yang Rongli, who is receiving 15 years sentence. Many more churches in China are suffering ongoing persecution this year. Chinese independent house churches are seen as a threat not because they are evil or dangerous, as authorities so often try to paint them. They are a threat because they often care deeply for the society and serve the community out of love and not control. The church also brings a uniquely connected civil society organization in China, bringing people from different economic, education, and social strata. Churches often model transparency in leadership, including democratically selecting church elders, rotation of church board members, and clear and independent financial structures. Christians in China do not oppose authorities, and the church has always sought to enrich Chinese society. They merely ask to be free from the control of the Chinese Communist Party, a self-identified atheist organization, and the sacred decisions of the church, including things like who can attend and be baptized, what kind of sermons can be preached, what songs of worship they can sing. My father started Zion in order to worship freely in a church that put God as the sole head of our church, like many faithful Christians everywhere. My father's church seeks to give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's, but hold on to the position that thou shalt have no other gods before me. Since I began advocating for my father and the release of other church leaders detained around a month ago, my family has also experienced transnational repression. A week after we began speaking out on my father's detention, my mother received a threatening phone call from someone impersonating a U.S. federal agent. I have also been watched and followed in Washington, D.C. as I met with friends and mentors who have been helping me. I'm sometimes indeed fearful. After all, I know that I seek to expose and hold account the second most powerful country in the world. Yet as a Christian, I believe that we are asked to take courage and speak truth, and that God who created heaven and earth will stand by our side. Similarly, I urge the leaders here today to take similar courage, to speak, to use the authority entrusted into your hands, and to not forget us. Speak our names, Pastor Ezra Jin, Pastor Gao Yinjia, Pastor Wang Lin, Pastor In Huibin, and all the leaders of Zion Church in China, and others as well. Pastor Gao Quanfu of Light of Zion Church in Xi'an, Pastor Wang Yi of Early Rain Covenant Church, Elder Zhang Chunlei of Guiyang Ren'ai Reformed Church, and many others. Do not signal defeat and acceptance of this trampling of human rights with your silence. We are praying for the full release of all Zion imprisoned church leaders today, And despite not knowing why this is happening and experiencing despair of seeing my father and others wrongfully imprisoned, I can draw strength in knowing that my God is a good God, and even in these bleakest moments, might be used for bigger things, and our work is not in vain. My father wrote in a letter from prison just a week ago that God has indeed used his power to uphold us. I believe that God is also testing us during this time like refining silver, painful, but full of love. But God will not abandon us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Drexel, for that very powerful testimony. I want to thank all the witnesses for their very powerful testimony. I know Chairman Smith has another commitment soon, so I'm going to turn to him to begin the questioning. And
I'll be brief, and Grace, thank you. What a moving testimony on behalf of your dad, and we do have to respond. I would ask the panel, I mean, in 2008, right before the Olympics in Beijing, not only did Frank Wolf and I go over, and I was shocked that the administration was, including Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, we're talking all about what venue, did they go to track and field, basketball? I said, human rights. So did Frank. Raise human rights. They've rounded up people all over Beijing so they couldn't talk to the press. Human rights. Now, Bush was talking about what opening ceremonies. Is he going to go? We said, you can't. And certainly if you do go, you got to meet with a representative group of the great human rights defenders from China, just like we have in this panel, like you, Grace, and Bob, and the others. And so I think we should maybe do a letter and ask before his meeting, certainly well before his meeting in April, that President, that our president, current president, meet with you and listen. I mean, really allocate enough time to really let both the substance and your hearts be conveyed to him. So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we do that in a bipartisan way, but it makes a difference. There's a culture of indifference and a culture of denial that pervades all of our human rights work, including and especially with religious freedom. It's not really going on, not really going on. Well, it is going on, and you're bearing witness to it so powerfully. So I think we really need to get the president, because he will be eyeball to eyeball with Xi Jinping sometime maybe in April. We're not sure when. And I think he needs to see all of you before he does that. And secondly, last night, I do have this big hearing. I'm sorry that there was a conflict on Nigeria. Last night I met with a large delegation from Nigeria. They're here to say nothing to see here. Again, the culture of indifference and maybe not as much indifference, but more denial. With their attorney general was there. Robido, who's the national security advisor, was there, and he. I said after we had a long discussion about Nigeria and the killing of moderate Muslims and the slaughter of Christians and the RCPC country, which Sam Brownback pushed so hard for and got in the last administration during Trump's first term. But I asked him, what are you doing? Well, there's this currying favor with Xi Jinping. Do you raise what's going on in Xinjiang and the genocide against the Muslim Uyghurs? And crickets, nothing. I said, well, is it lack of information? Do you not know what's going on there? Genocide is the worst of the worst, and it's happening against co-religionists, your fellow Muslims. We all speak out for every faith, but here you are getting closer to China, and that ought to be absolutely preconditioned. So I just raised that, the meeting, and I think the president would be moved by meeting with all of you. That's how we get moved, listening to your testimonies, looking you in the eye, and knowing, Grace, that we need to speak. God hasn't forgotten, nor should we, nor should the President of the United States, your dad, and all the rest. So thank you, Chairman, for letting me go first. I do have to run over to the other hearing, but thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good luck at the next hearing. Thank you for your passion. I'm going to begin the questioning. By the way, it's great to have Representative Kiggins here, so welcome, and we're glad you're here. I want to get to Dr. Fu. You said you had recommendations. I'd like to, if you can succinctly provide those to the Commission right now, I'd like to hear what those are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to submit my written testimony.
Without
as a
objection.
Record. A few recommendations. First, I know Congress have been discussing the Contra CCP Transnational Repression Act, several bills. I really recommend both the Senate and the House to take on this. And the second one is Senator Ted Budd has already proposed the Combating the Persecution of Religious Groups in China Act. So I also really advocate for that. The third one, I think we should apply the global Magnitsky sanctions to officials involved in the persecution against the Zion Church and the Golden Lampstand, the long sentences, the rest of those who just basically traveling overseas for a religious conference, and those who are engineered the enforced disappearance of lawyer Gao Zhisheng and Zhang Yadi. The fourth one, I think, is also a very bipartisan one that I really want to raise this, especially for the Trump administration. That to protect these religiously based Chinese asylum seekers fleeing religious persecution, including those who are actually already vetted but stuck in overseas, like in Thailand. But because of the adjustment of the administration after President Trump took office, I'm very, very concerned that we have an overreaction by really throwing the baby with the bathwater, because there are many who are validly claimed for under religious persecution, were already in some cases already vetted by the previous administration, but was literally about to board the flight, but was stopped. And I think we should urge the administration to seriously consider them and protect them. And we can't just use the name of the illegal, contra the illegal aliens, and then compromise our country's principles to protect those the religious freedom and those who seek asylum and religious refugees to the United States. I think I also agree with both the co-chair and Ambassador Brownback that religious freedom must be raised in every high-level diplomatic meetings with this PRC. And
Thank you. Let me, sorry to interrupt, because I do want to take the time to get to some of the other panelists. You did a good job of laying out the shifts and trends that have happened with regard to the CCP to control religion over the last 10 years. I want to ask all the other witnesses what you have seen, what your views are in that regard, the trends and the tactics that the CCP has used to control religion, particularly during the Xi Jinping era, and if you also want to add, how does PRC intimidation against religion, against groups outside of China, impacted what's happening around the world, and if you have any personal experience with this, I would appreciate. But why don't we begin with you, Ambassador Brownback, on the trends that you've seen and why? Why do we think the Chinese Communist Party is clamping down so hard? And I'll ask all of the witnesses, except for Dr. Fu. He talked about that in his testimony.
Thanks. I think it's a good question to ask. They have grown in their fear of people of faith.
So it's a weakness we're seeing.
It is a weakness.
We always think of it as a strength, but you're saying it's actually a weakness of theirs. They're very scared of people of faith.
Completely. fearful of it. Much more fearful of that, as I said, than of our aircraft carriers or nuclear weapons. They fear their own people. Well, why? Well, because they are afraid of losing control. They're not acting like a confident country at all. And so why are we even ever hesitant about backing these people of faith? That there could be nothing more American than religious freedom. This is at core who we are. And look at the lineup you have of Muslims and Christians, Falun Gong, Buddhists, that they are deathly scared of. And that's the way they're acting. And the oppression has intensified. And then they've invented these security systems and perfected them that truly are mind-boggling, the quality of them, and then freely dispersing them. In the book where we are now, they've dispersed these systems to 80 different authoritarian countries. Hand them out like candy to help in the oppression. So I just think if they're spending so much time and effort doing this, we ought to be backing these people.
Thank you. I only have a few seconds left, but I do want all the witnesses to quickly answer that question that I posed, and then we'll turn to Rep. McGovern. Mr. Juma, do you have a view on that question that I just posed?
Yes. 我认为呢，中国共产党不仅仅是害怕自己的民众，同时呢，他们也是正在各种趋势，我们可以明显的看到，他们正在走向一个民粹主义、打造一个军国主义的道路上的一些必须条件。因此，我们今天看到对所有组织的打压，实质的核心目标就是要全国一盘棋、政治整体一盘棋的军国主义道路上的一个必然。
I believe that the CCP is showing fear of the people, and the trends that we're seeing is trending towards nationalism. You can see from the groups that they're oppressing, this is part of a larger chess game.
Thank you. Mr. Sering, do you have a view on the question I posed?
Yes, very much so, Mr. Chairman. I think one single issue is that they fear the Dalai Lama and his influence in Tibet.
Yeah.
They look at Tibetan Buddhism as a challenge to the continuation of the Chinese Communist Party, and therefore they use the United Front Work Department, a CCP organ, to control Tibetans inside Tibet as well as outside, including American citizens, through use of visa permission, whereby the United Front, whose whole mission is to confront the Dalai Lama to control Tibetan Americans' visa process. Here I would like to submit two statements that the Dalai Lama had issued on his reincarnation in 2011 and 2025 for the record, please.
Thank you. And Ms. Drexel, do you have a view on this? And again, thank you for your very powerful, courageous testimony.
Thank you so much. I agree with Ambassador Brownback, and just a quick anecdote. When they came to imprison my father or detain my father, there were 30 police people that came into my father's house to imprison a 56-year-old pastor who can't karate chop his way out of anything. And so there was no need there could be one police person that could have come. Instead, they had 30 people surround the entire house in order to detain him. And that just shows how much that they fear this type of this faith. And I think part of it is, again, because of the resilience of the faithful, that they can't take away something that is so intimate and so core to oneself. And in terms of signaling, they also want to show the world that there's no one there to help you, that your God is not there, your church is not there, there's no one there, and therefore you are always under my and solely my control. And I think that is wrong. And I think this is a universal human rights issue, and that we need to stand together with those that are persecuted for faith.
Well, this commission is here, right? That's our point. Let me just make a comment here. I think this is really insightful testimony, because we all see Xi Jinping as a strong man. He's getting stronger and he's getting control, but this is happening because they're actually weak and scared and afraid. I think that's really important for all of us to remember. Representative McGovern.
Well, thank you very much. Let me thank all of you for your incredibly powerful testimonies. And Grace, we're not, on this commission, we're not going to forget about your dad, and we're going to continue to advocate for his release. You know, Mr. Chairman, one of my most treasured possessions are these Tibetan prayer beads that I wear. About a year and a half ago, I was in India. Bhushang, you were there, and we met with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he blessed these and gave them to me, and told me that they will have a calming influence, that they will help me deal with my fears and anxieties and my worries about the world. And I'm anxious to meet with His Holiness again to tell him that they're not working. I mean, and listening to the testimonies here today, I mean, the issue of religious freedom is more urgent than ever. Let me, Bhushang Siri, I share, by the way, Ambassador Brownback's kind of impatience on the Tibetan issue. I mean, the middle road was something that was has been talked about for decades now. And we've been led to believe that maybe the Chinese government might be receptive, maybe they might be willing to negotiate on certain things, and they just keep on stringing everybody along. So I do think we need to be thinking in terms of consequences, you know, of responses that are more than just words of condemnation, but that have an impact. So I actually like the idea of basically, you know, putting deadlines on some of this stuff. And if China doesn't comply, then we formally recognize Tibet as an independent country. And we have to insist also, you know, that the Tibetan people be able to decide, you know, their religious future. You know, the Tibetan Policy and Support Act of 2020, which I authored with then Senator Rubio, makes it United States policy to support the right of Tibetan Buddhists to select their own leaders, and rejects China's interference in recognizing a successor or reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama and any future Dalai Lama. And so I just have a couple of questions here, but how would you assess the U.S. government's implementation of this provision, including under the current administration? In addition, TPSA also authorizes sanctions, such as those under the Global Magnitsky Act, against those officials who interfere in the reincarnation decisions under Tibetan Buddhism. Has this authority been used, and how would you assess its effectiveness? And finally, we have discussed the value of creating an international norm in support of Tibetan Buddhists' right to determine their religious leaders, including the next Dalai Lama, including coordination by like-minded governments. Is that happening, and can the U.S. government play a leadership role?
Thank you, Congressman. I think on the 3 points. First, on what this administration is doing on Tibet. When Secretary Rubio, soon after he took over the Secretary of State position, he used the occasion of the Tibetan New Year to issue a statement reiterating American policy on Tibet, which is positive. But we want to see action to follow that policy statement, which we hope that this administration will take. Secondly, on the matter of the reincarnation, as you rightly say, there is this policy of the United States government to say that it only respects this Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhist authority on reincarnation, not the Chinese government. We want the United States to reiterate its policy and follow up on this implementation to say that if the Chinese government violates the Tibetan religious freedom, they will be sanctioned. On the issue of sanctions, there is the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, which you did, and TPSA also has provision. The Magnitsky Act also has provision. So what the administration, not just this administration, previous administration too, has been saying is that they do sanction Chinese officials, but these are all not announced publicly who they are doing. So we would recommend that the government administration here sanction these, identify these people publicly so that the concerned Chinese authorities get the right message. In terms of the future of Tibet, which you refer to, I believe that the Dalai Lama and the elected leadership of the Tibetan people have been in earnest working for a solution that is in the win-win to both the Chinese and the Tibetans. And therefore, the path of peaceful struggle they have led needs international support for this to be fulfilled. If there is enough international pressure on the Chinese, whether through or such acts that you describe, or any other way of strengthening American policy, that can only help if the Chinese government respond by sitting down and resolving the issue of Tibet.
No, I know, I appreciate that. I guess one of my worries, and again, His Holiness is 90, and I hope he lives to be 190. But I think the Chinese government is calculating that when His Holiness passes on, that maybe the interest in Tibet will wither, that there won't be as much attention. And I think we need to make it clear that that will not be the case. And again, I think all of us, I think on the Tibet issue in particular, we need to step it up here in Congress, and we need to encourage the administration to use the tools that we have given them to pressure China even more. And to everybody here, I've known Bob Fu for many years. I thank you for your incredible courage and your leadership. And we are all deeply concerned about not only people that are being repressed in China, but Chinese transnational repression happening here. And I'm with the senator here that, again, we can't tolerate that. I mean, you're in the United States. You should be able to express your views and say what you want, and you shouldn't have to fear that there are repercussions coming from China. And Ambassador Brownback, again, thank you for your consistent leadership on these matters. I look forward to your book. But I agree with you. This is not just a human rights issue. It's a national security issue. And I do think China's lack of acceptance of religious freedom is a sign of their own weakness. And so I thank you all, and thank you, Senator, for yielding.
Thank you, Congressman McGovern. Representative Keegans.
Yeah, thank you very much for holding the hearing. It's just a privilege to be here, and I would argue with Mr. McGovern that maybe his prayer beads are working, because we see so much interest and just the encouraged faith that all of you have in the stories you've shared. So maybe they're continuing to work in the background, but just to thank you for sharing your stories. I apologize for being a few minutes late, but would love to hear from each of you, just to provide some context for myself. But how are the religious leaders in China still able to conduct their services and grow their congregations and practice? And what type of support system surrounds them? Because I'm sure the fear is real and the threats are real, and not just in China, but the congregations that they have here, because we know that it is expanding to other countries, including our own. So I just am curious about that support system, how they're still even able to have a presence and operate and grow their religions in a place like China. If you could maybe each answer.
Thank you so much. I will quickly just talk about Zion's Own Church Network. We are still able to meet on Zoom. There are several pastors who just so happen to be abroad. Several of them were studying in the US, or they were at a meeting and conference in South Korea when this takedown happened. So they are still able to host our hybrid Zoom meetings or sermons and worship. And unfortunately, it does still take a lot of, there are a lot of consequences. So there requires a lot of bravery for those who still come to services, either in person or online. And again, many people have suffered already consequences. But I think that, like even during the Cultural Revolution, people held on to their faith, even if it meant hiding in someone's, in the kitchen and quietly singing to their families and their kids. And I don't think even during that time they were not able to wipe out Christianity. I don't think that they will be able to wipe out Christianity today. But I do think that it is, a lot of people in China, the Christians in China, are suffering and are dealing with the consequences of being faithful to their faith.
Thank you. Mr. Fu.
Thank you. Before answering your question, may I just also suggest, especially the Senate, to take the vote for the ambassador at large, the designee, the former Congressman Mark Walker. I think the State Department is still, at the IRF office, still that position is vacant. I mean, if we are really serious on religious freedom, we should vote for the ambassadorship first. And in terms of support for the religious communities, I mean, those, I know countering the CCP's war, like even against the cross, the CCP declared the cross as a national security threat. A wooden and metal cross is an enemy of the state. So many, government-sanctioned church pastors were also being arrested or decommissioned for simply refusing to take down the cross from the rooftop of the church building. Some were sentenced to 12 to 14 years imprisonment. And but the cross, I mean, it's not just a visible cross; it's really a universal symbol. So a lot of the Christian communities globally has been supporting. And when Xi Jinping basically declared war against the Scripture, the access of the Bible to the children, we this year alone, with one small organization based in West Texas, we printed over 40,000 copies of the Children's Bible and got into China, distributed in 20 provinces to benefit a lot of children. I think the CCP's war ultimately will fail and doomed to fail. And I really applaud for both the international community support, including, of course, today's hearing, and the global religious communities' continuous solidarity with those who are persecuted.
Thank you. In Tibet, the Chinese authorities have changed the policy from a physical destruction of Tibetan monastic institutes to control of Tibetan monastic system. Today, monasteries are allowed ritualistic activities, but at the same time, they are trying to sinicize Tibetan Buddhism so that while they don't allow the monasteries to have the Dalai Lama's portrait, all monasteries should have the Chinese leader Xi Jinping and others' portraits in them, and they should have political education. But in real Tibetan Buddhist study, the Chinese authorities do not allow Tibetan Buddhist students to study with their teachers, some of whom, including the Dalai Lama, are outside, and any contact is prohibited.
Interesting. Thank you. Interesting.
谢谢议员。然后我们现在看到，在中国政府正在全面的系统化的解构每一个宗教，无论是基督教还是伊斯兰教，或者是藏传佛教，或者其他的任何一个宗教的存在。那么我们这种系统化呢，已经解构了几乎我们已知的所有的传教体系。那么因此呢，我想在这里反问一个问题给各位所有的人，在场的所有人，那就是我们今天讨论的话题是应对中国的宗教战争，而战争似乎只有中国 CCP 在向我们开炮，而我们没有任何能力向他们反击。我想让每一个人在这里去思考，我们该如何反击，不是仅仅只是去陈述我们的故事，我们的苦难已经足够，我们的遭遇也已经到了无法忍受的地步，但是我们回击的力量却是无力的。谢谢。
I think we have presented evidence that the CCP is systematically trying to destroy all religion, whether that is Tibetan Buddhism, Christianity, Muslim, and we have covered that these are all religions that are under attack. But I would like to ask everyone here the question, this religious war that the CCP is waging on us, we have taken all these attacks, but we have not retaliated. So I would like everyone here to think about what we can do in response, rather than just tell our stories here. We have suffered enough, and we have suffered beyond tolerance. I think now is the time to think about how we defend ourselves.
I would agree with that statement, and Bob Foos, too, about getting the ambassador for religious freedom confirmed. Mark Walker, excellent guy, do a wonderful job, but you need that point person in the administration so that they can really push these things inside the administration. Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question to Ambassador Brownback, since you've had time as Ambassador at Large for international religious freedom? What have you seen work in the past, and what perhaps didn't work as well? But do you have any other direction you can provide?
Real consequences. words just don't cut it. You got to get at the money, or you got to make them scared.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's not going to work. The thing about it is, you've got right here, we've got the most American thing possible, religious freedom, that they are scared to death of.
Yeah.
And we back up and say, well, I guess we won't talk about that because it might offend the Chinese. Well, they're at war with us.
Yeah.
Whether we want to admit it or not, they've already moved that way.
Yeah.
And so we're just laying out here today clear, consequential things that the United States could do or even start talking about that'll get their attention.
Yeah.
You get President Trump in the White House meeting with a few people that have been persecuted for their faith from China and telling their stories, particularly if it's like Falun Gong members or Tibetans, heads will blow up in Beijing. There's just real, they are deathly scared of this.
I agree. We certainly win on the religious freedom front, and that's a powerful weapon. So thank you very much for all of you for being here.
Well, I'm going to end with just one final round of questions here. And so really, Dr. Fu, it's a very powerful story of Bibles to China. Again, it reminds me of the story of my mom bringing Bibles to the Soviet Union as a daring young American. So just very quickly, we talk about this issue of fear. Dr. Fu, Ms. Drexel, do we have a sense of how many Christians live in China? Any ballpark estimate? And then I'm going to ask the same thing of Mr. Sering on Buddhists and Mr. Juma on Muslims.
Yes, nobody knows the exact number, but according even to the analysis from the sociologist by the Purdue University, the estimated the number of Christians in China, including those who worship in the government-sanctioned church venues, has at least reached to over 100 million.
Wow.
To 130 million.
And do we think that number is growing or declining despite the pressure?
I definitely think it's growing because just the example of Zion Church, from in 10 years from 2007 to 2018, before they were formally banned, they grew from 20 to like 1,500. And then in the past 5 years, after Pastor Ezra Jin was exiled even from Beijing, from his own home, and the church grew from 1,500 now to over 5,000. Actually, daily reach out. I mean, the devotion, though I sometimes even sign up on the daily devotion on their app, is reached at minimum 10,000 every morning. 10,000 people. So that's kind of an explosive growth.
Mrs. Sering, do you have a sense on Buddhists?
The total number of Tibetans, not just in Tibet Autonomous Region, but in the other Tibetan areas, which we call Tibet in Sichuan, Yunnan, Gansu, etc., it's around 7 million. Out of that, more than 90% would be Tibetan Buddhists. But there are also sizable number of Chinese who follow Tibetan Buddhism and Mongolians.
Great. Mr. Juma, you have a sense on?
我们一共有根据政府的统计，包括我们自己的统计，一共有3500万到4500万之间的穆斯林，包括维吾尔以及其他10几个少数民族，包括汉族在内。
So according to ours and the government's estimate, there are 3.5 to 4.5 million Muslims. 35. Apologies, 35 to 45 million Muslims, and that includes Hui Muslims, Uyghurs, as well as Chinese people who have converted to Islam.
Great. Let me ask another question. I'm just very Dr. Fu, this issue of intimidation and people surrounding your house, and do we know who these people were? I mean, do you have any sense? Were they Americans? Were they Chinese sent to the U.S.? And, when you called the authorities in Texas, what did they do? My view is if they're not Americans, they should be booted out of the country the way these, police stations in New York City and everything. There's just no way we should tolerate any of this thuggish behavior by commies in our own country. So who were they? Do you know?
Some are those who surrounded my home with the 3 months nonstop threat. The law enforcement, including the FBI agents, they did arrested too. And
But were they Americans? Do we know who they were? Were they deported?
Both of the arrested are American citizens. One
Okay.
from San Francisco.
So
one
they're
from,
just brainwashed?
And they came, even with financial aid, support. They are guests of the Chinese embassy publicly.
Yeah.
So you can tell they're associated with the Chinese government.
Okay. Ambassador, I have a kind of a tough question, but I'm going to ask you anyways because you have a lot of knowledge in this area. The Vatican had a agreement with Beijing in 2018. I don't think it's been public, but it seemed to cede a lot of authority in the Catholic Church to the Communist Party. To some criticism with the last pope. I think they have a difficult balance because they want to expand the number of Chinese who are practicing Christianity and Catholicism. So I think sometimes the balance is, well, maybe we'll just accommodate the Chinese Communist Party. But at the same time, when you have 9 or 10 bishops who are gone, disappeared, certainly the accommodation policy doesn't appear to be working very well. I had the opportunity to talk about these issues with senior Vatican officials pretty recently. And, my message was, maybe you need to rebalance here and speak out a little bit more. I mean, America is a beacon, of course, for religious freedom, but so is the Vatican. I mean, they've been around a lot longer than we have, 2,000 plus years. So what's your sense? You have a real good insight on this, and you've probably dealt with them, on what the Vatican should be doing on these topics. Because again, it's not an easy topic. If you speak out really strongly, you probably would expect Xi Jinping to arrest 30 bishops. But the accommodation policy, which I believe was the policy of the last pope, we have a new American pope who I'm very impressed by, but it didn't seem to work. So do you have a sense of that? And it's a little tough to tell the Vatican what to do, but we tell a lot of countries our views. I'm wondering what your view is on this topic.
We need the Vatican's moral voice
It's a big moral voice, you're right.
on China.
And do you think it was, I'm not talking about the current pope, he's just getting started, but the last pope, it seemed like it was a very muted voice. Would you agree with that?
It was. I traveled several times to the Vatican to meet with officials about it. Secretary Pompeo and I both even had a public conference there about the agreement and about this is not working. If you negotiated this agreement to get these bishops free, they're not free. And who knows their internal decision-making, but we really need their moral voice on religious freedom for everybody.
Yeah, for everybody, not just for Christians.
No, I mean, they need to be out there speaking up for Uyghur Muslims and for the forced labor situation, and they need to be speaking out for Christians. And my hope that this new pope, actually, I would love to see him fly to, well, this isn't going to happen, but he ought to, fly to Taiwan and give the John Paul speech of Be Not Afraid that he did in Poland. I mean, wow, that would be beautiful to have that moral voice saying, be not afraid.
Yeah. That's very powerful when Pope John Paul II had that stand.
It changed.
Well, it helped bring
Eastern
down
Europe.
the Soviet Union, there's no doubt about it.
Changed Eastern Europe. It changed the mentality, the whole place. They said, because there are more Catholics there in Poland, even though they hadn't gone to Mass in decades, it was still in their heart.
Yeah. Great, great. Good answer. Do you have any other? Well, listen, I want to thank all of the witnesses. I know it takes a lot of courage. Many of you have, suffered your own personal tragedies because of this issue of religious freedom. And I just want to thank all the witnesses here today. It's a great hearing, very informative, learned a lot. I think it's just important that we do this, right? And that people, not just in America, but around the world, see this, because our voice is very important. And as you've all mentioned, it's been a part of the founding of this great republic, and it's a core element of who we are as Americans. So officially, the hearing record will remain open for an additional week for members to revise and extend remarks and to submit additional written statements and submit written questions, additional questions for the witnesses, and we would respectfully ask the witnesses to be able to get those additional questions back to this committee within the next 3 weeks. And with that, I want to thank the witnesses again. This hearing is adjourned.